Public Domain is a 5-issue comic book miniseries written and illustrated by Chip Zdarsky, who some fans of comics may recognize as the writer behind the current runs of both Daredevil and Batman, or the creative force behind some of the decade's most popular indie creator-owned books like Sex Criminals. The series was initially published on his Substack in late 2021 and early 2022, and then it made a physical release from June to October of 2022 through Image Comics. The trade paperback was released in January of 2023, and a few weeks ago I finally was able to get my hands on it and read it in its entirety. The series follows Miles and David Dallas, the sons of famous comic book artist Sid Dallas, who was one half of the creative force behind pop culture's greatest hero, The Domain. Sid, along with writer Jerry Jasper, created the character back in the 70s, and since then The Domain has become one of the most lucrative properties in American pop culture, spanning not only comic books, but also movies and merchandising as well. The only problem is that despite the character's success, Sid Dallas barely sees a penny of the profit. And that's on account of the official creation being credited to Jerry Jasper, and the intellectual property being owned by Singular Comics and its sister company, Singular Studios. The only things that Sid does get are measly royalty payments and 2 free tickets to each new Domain movie premiere, where he's immediately shuffled off the red carpet at the first sign of anyone more relevant. The saddest part, or maybe the most endearing part, is that Sid doesn't really seem to mind any of this, and he's purely content with seeing his characters on the big screen and having the knowledge that he created something that people still love and cherish. The one who can't let it rest, though, is his son Miles, who harbors very complicated feelings about both the creation and its creator. It's mainly Miles who expresses his bitterness over the slight to Sid's career, but his feelings are wrapped up in his own personal failings and the anger that he directs at a father who worked far too much during his childhood. After a disgruntled assistant of Jerry Jasper's uncovers an old document that potentially attributes ownership of the Domain to Sid, what ensues is a story that blends elements of legal drama that you'd see in something like The Social Network, a family drama about generational divides and learning to move from a passive to an active role in your life, and a comedy that oscillates between dry and absurd. What impresses me the most about Public Domain is how it can so effortlessly serve as both a love letter to the comic book industry and superheroes as a whole, while also serving as an indictment to some of the shadier and more harmful aspects of that industry. Chip himself has said in a Substack post that I have linked below that the story he tells in Public Domain is certainly personal, but not as deeply personal as some may initially think it is. He goes on to talk about how he entered the comic book space at a time when a lot of the problems in the industry were well recognized and frequently talked about. And as such, he's made an effort to put a strong focus on creator-owned works that he will own in perpetuity. A model pioneered by many creators and publishers, with Image Comics probably chief among them. And in doing so, he's made his peace with writing for books like Batman or Daredevil for giant traditional publishers, where his work may someday provide source material for adaptations that will most likely pay him pennies on the dollar for his work, if anything. But regardless of how connected Chip feels to the material as it relates to his own personal life, you can immediately tell that he knows this topic intimately. I was surprised by how many facets of superheroes and comic books in the current state of American pop culture that he was able to fit into just 5 normal-sized issues. And I was even more impressed by how he was able to do that while also exploring the personal drama of each member of the Dallas family. A classic example that a lot of people these days bring up, including Chip, is the case of Ed Brubaker, who is a prolific comic book creator who created, among other things, The Winter Soldier. And the dissonance between how Brubaker is compensated for his work and how commercially successful that character has gone on to be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a real thing that happened to a real person. And while that's a more modern example, you can tell that Chip drew inspiration from a lot of Golden Age examples as well, an era where probably more intellectual theft happened than any other time in the industry's history. Back then, writers, pencilers, inkers, and letterers would work in a bullpen-style office, and they would cross-collaborate frequently and often just fulfill whatever work was dropped on their desk by the editor that day. And not only has this made it difficult to source Golden Age work to its respective creator, it also made copyright an especially sticky issue, where some pioneers were cheated out of a fortune, like in the case where Bob Kane was credited as the sole creator of Batman, even though Bill Finger had just as much of a hand, if not more of a hand, in the character's creation. And you can see these inspirations clear as day when you look at the relationship between Sid Dallas, the artist, and Jerry Jasper, the writer. The latter of which is still riding high on a fortune that he was only 50% responsible for making. Zdarsky's book can be very bold in certain places in its criticism of clear fictional synonyms for things like Disney and the MCU. But his hot takes never feel bitter or forced or like he's a man just angrily screaming into the wind. And like I said, underneath all of this is a fantastic family drama, and I think that each character is fleshed out very well. Sid is a perfect example of a man who missed big moments in his life because he was too busy working, which his wife and sons harbor mixed feelings about, understandably. But he's also a great example of people we've known, or perhaps have been, who are simply content with living a quiet life and not ruffling too many feathers, even if they may be on the receiving end of some wrongdoing. There's some really great moments between Sid and his wife Candy, where she expresses her frustration over both his obsession with his early career, but also his unwillingness to fight for himself and assert what he wants out of life. And on the other side of this coin, you've got Miles, who, due to some personal failings and problems, which I won't reveal, sees this fight to reclaim his dad's legacy as a way to finally get a win, and to make up for what he views as a mediocre career so far as a writer. And when these tensions get heated, Sid's other son, David, has enough of a carefree and laid-back attitude to simmer down some of these more tense moments. At the end of the day, I really can't say enough good things about Public Domain. Sure, sometimes the story steps out of the realm of realness, and sometimes the plot will contort itself to get to a certain endpoint that Chip has in mind, but it's never really anything that's too distracting, and is still pretty consistent with the format of comic book storytelling. Under the Red Hood is considered to be one of the best Batman stories ever written, and the reason for Jason Todd's resurrection isn't even comprehensible from a plot perspective. So if you're gonna level accusations of plot inconsistency at Public Domain, especially with some of the stuff that happens in the 5th issue, then just be prepared to level that at the entire comic book industry. For me at least, it didn't distract me from the story or my enjoyment of it. All in all, I think this is one of my favorite comics of the past 5 years, and if you are a fan of superheroes or pop culture at all, I consider this honestly essential reading. It's smart, the characters are fleshed out, it makes plenty of great criticism without being mired down in bitterness, and I think it succeeds at everything it sets out to do. And for that, I have to give Public Domain by Chip Zdarsky a 5 out of 5. If you made it this far, I just wanted to say thank you so much for giving this video a watch. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to give it a like and consider subscribing. I've got a bunch of different kinds of videos over on my channel, so feel free to give those a try and see if you like any of them. Also, you can follow me on socials with the links on my channel page, and you can subscribe to my newsletter if you enjoy the way that I talk about pop culture. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.